Stepping into young adulthood also means stepping up as the primary manager of your food allergies. Today, we're talking about what changes when you take charge of your allergy care, whether you're heading to college, moving out, or staying closer to home but managing life more independently. This is the final episode in our Food Allergy Ages and Stages series, inspired by the American Academy of Allergy, Asthma, and Immunology's Ages and Stages handouts. If you've missed the other episodes, we've covered early allergen introduction, food allergy basics for newly diagnosed families, managing food allergies in babies and toddlers, managing food allergies in school-aged kids, and managing food allergies in teenagers. This podcast is made in partnership with the Allergy and Asthma Network. We want to thank Genentech and Aquestive for sponsoring today's episode. While they support the show, all opinions are our own and sponsorship doesn't influence our content or editorial decisions. Any mentions of brands is for informational purposes only and not an endorsement. Now let's get into it. You're listening to The Itch, a podcast exploring all things allergy, asthma, and immunology.
We're moving on, and now we're on to the young adult phase with the 18 to 21-year-olds, and we have Dr. Theresa Bingemann, one of my good friends, and one of the people that actually wrote these handouts that we have been using as a guide. And so, Theresa, thank you so much for taking the time today to be here with us. We really appreciate it. And can you just introduce yourself for the audience?
Sure. I am Theresa Bingemann. I am an adult and pediatric allergist and immunologist, and I work at the University of Rochester, where I'm also the allergy and immunology program director. And thank you guys for having me. I love this topic and this age group.
I'm really excited to dive into this with you because I know that when I was 19, things changed for me in terms of how I dealt with my food allergies because I had one of those reactions that you'll remember forever. And I was in a lot of denial. It was like I moved out of the country. I was trying to be my own independent person. And then boom, food allergies hit me in the face. And it was a reality that I couldn't escape anymore. So I think setting the stage for this age, so ages 18 to 21, can we talk about why this transition is so important?
So this is such an exciting yet terrifying transition and age. So we all get so excited about potentially leaving the house, whether that is moving on our own, whether that's going to college or university, or maybe going to the military or something else. And we don't think about often until we get there how different that actually is and the things we took for granted. So the fact that we had someone always watching our back, we had the security of our parents, even if we were trying to push them away for a few years. And so when you get there and realize, oh boy, it's all me. And depending how big or small your new environment is, it may not feel like there's a ton of support. And even though there's ways of getting it if you need it. And so that first, wow, I'm on my own, I need to sort this out, can be associated with some anxiety too. And this may also be the first time someone had to manage things entirely on their own.
Absolutely. It's a big step. I mean, graduating from high school and moving on with life is one of the biggest moments, I think, for a parent. It's a moment where we're kind of becoming empty nesters or whatever they call it. And it's a big moment in general. But with food allergies, there's other things that families and patients think about. And that's really what this episode is about, is just really digging into all of those first time everything and how can we prep and how can we make that a lot easier for people. And so the first thing is once you are moving to a college campus, or as you said, maybe the military or wherever you're choosing to go to, how can you advocate for yourself in that setting?
I always start with before someone gets there, and ideally learning as much as possible about the environment, how things are done, and what resources there might be. So I often recommend, if possible, to ask about these things when you're exploring the next phase, and also maybe attending the disability support office to find out what resources there are, or meeting with the dining services resources people to find out how they deal with food allergies, how things are labeled, and what you need may really differ depending on how many things you're allergic to and how prevalent they are in the food that may be served there. Starting there, even if you didn't have the opportunity to do it before you chose whatever environment, make sure you do it when you get there. It can be helpful to talk to your resident advisor, and if you had the opportunity to discuss with someone before you established your housing, whether you would have your own place to cook or not, whether that was something you felt like you needed or wanted or not. And also think about the idea of, do I want to have a roommate that might have a food allergy as well? Would I prefer to be alone? Think about those different situations and what will help you be comfortable or not. And so that can guide your steps when you first get there. And even though you're moving away from home, I like to remind everyone it is okay to reach out to your parents, and your parents will actually feel a lot better if you do.
Yeah, definitely. I think that it's really important. And I think when I first started university, we didn't think of having food allergies as something that I would go to the disabilities office for. And now I think that it's so much more common that the disabilities office is more set up for that. We had to pretty much advocate for me to get into a dorm with a kitchen, which was really hard to. It was like one of the more requested situations, and we had to explain really why I needed to be in that situation. And I think nowadays it's a little bit more common and that there are more accommodations for people with food allergies. So I love that of, are you comfortable eating food prepared by other people, or would you rather have that situation where you can prepare food yourself? And yeah, I think as we've talked about in these ages and stages, hopefully you've been given some tools to be able to figure out what makes you comfortable in terms of what you're going to eat. In regards to being prepared for life in general, what kind of things do you suggest this transition phase group needs to know for preparing for emergency situations?
So I think the first and most important thing is to always remember prevention and then being prepared for an emergency. The hardest thing, I think, for individuals this age with food allergies is speaking up. And I think many patients often feel like, gosh, here I go again, this conversation again. And it can get a little frustrating and there can be some disclosure fatigue. The most important thing is the prevention piece and ways they can do that, whether that is speaking with the chef and understanding the way they do things, understanding the way allergens are labeled in the dining hall. And also, if they see something that doesn't feel like it's being done in a safe way, speaking up about that. And yes, it's hard. The onus is on the individual, although I think schools, like you mentioned, Kortney, are so much better at this, especially in the years that I've been in practice. I've definitely seen this becoming far more manageable for people than it was in the past. I think the other part that we always have to remember is that you actually have to have your epinephrine to use it. Patients often will say, well, what is the best device? And really, the best device is the device that they can get, that they know how to use, and they're willing to use. And each patient might feel that a different one is best. They have to be willing to carry it. They need to have a plan to carry it. There's a lot of steps that occur prior to that reaction to make sure someone's safe. And so then when they have the device, they should know how to use it and they should routinely practice how to use it. There was a study actually that looked at whether people use their epinephrine device appropriately. And the only significant factor was training within 6 months. I think about that where people should probably practice with their trainer or visit the website and look at the videos or even practice on a piece of citrus so they know how to use their device. Of course, for the newer devices that go in your nose, the citrus isn't going to work so well, but those are a little more self-explanatory too.
Yeah. And I think going back to communication, the most important people are your new friends, right? And so those are the people that are going to be your community, your people. They're going to care about you and they want to know how to keep you safe. So I think the reminder that I give to this age group is if you were in a situation where you could help one of your friends, you would want to to be able to do that. And so the only way that someone can do that is by knowing, number one, that you have a food allergy, number two, where your epinephrine device is, and also how to use it. That trainer, we talked a lot about that in other episodes too, using that trainer to train everyone around you. And in this situation, definitely using it to train your new friends so that they really feel comfortable and they're not scared if something were to happen and there were a reaction. They would just want to feel as confident as possible and make sure that they could keep you safe.
That's a really, really important point. I think of when I see teens come into the office and young adults, they'll often bring a friend or a significant other with them. And I often talk to that person to find out if my patient's doing the things they say they're doing to keep themselves safe. Because in my experience, those individuals care immensely about them and want to do anything they can to keep them safe. So if they're not doing the things that are in their best interest, they're very willing to rat them out. It's important. I share that in the context of you were just talking about teaching friends. Friends want to know. They don't want to see you be sick. And yes, when you first meet someone, I can understand that you might not want to share this personal information and the challenges of how to have this conversation, but your friends do care and they want to have fun. They want to be with you. And so rely on them. And that can really be a nice source of support for you when you see that as well.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. When I was 19, I had this anaphylactic reaction, which was very life-changing. I ended up going to the hospital, rode in an ambulance, got in a lot of trouble with my dorm room because I never disclosed that I had food allergies to the main person. So I learned a lot about what to do and what not to do. But my friends were so upset that they didn't know how to fix me, is what they wanted to say at the time. But they didn't know what to do because I didn't prepare them. And they were so upset that they felt helpless and all they could do was call 911, but they could see that something wasn't right. So I just want to reiterate that they were so upset with me in the end because I didn't prepare them because they wanted to be prepared. So just reiterating the fact that our friends care for us so much more than we think they do, or we might feel really embarrassed to talk about it. But at the end of the day, I think it's more embarrassing for your friends when they have no idea what to do.
And just plain out scary, right? If something bad were to happen, which unfortunately with food allergies could, then it would just be very, very sad and they would feel like they were at fault because they weren't able to do anything. So I think that's the main thing. It's just outside of everything else, it's that your life is at risk and people want to be able to help you and they don't want to be scared and they don't want to feel helpless.
And another thing is we talk about always having epinephrine on you and using it. And I feel like I do need to reiterate that point is that some schools may have epinephrine in the dining hall or around campus. And so to learn about those things, if they're open to you, not every school does that, but having that awareness and also knowing what the student health center is capable of managing and comfortable managing and how to activate EMS locally, because some schools actually have an emergency service that could potentially help with administering epinephrine if needed as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point because if you are in a more remote university setting or a college setting, you want to know where the local EMS is and how long that will take. We do this for travel, right? We want to know how close the local hospital is. The same situation needs to go for your university or college of choice or wherever you end up going after you leave your parents' house. But what happens if you have roommates and you have a shared kitchen or you have a little kitchenette? How do you create a safe environment that's not going to feel like you're putting out your roommates, that they don't feel like they have to do 100 different things and then they're nervous and they don't want to use the kitchen, so that they can use the kitchen and you can use the kitchen and you also don't feel nervous and that you have to disinfect everything every time you go into it?
To be honest, Kortney, I think you're the best person to answer that question because you are the person that's been living with this and you're the one that's navigated that so many times in your life. So I'd love to hear from you what you think that our 18 to 21-year-olds can do.
Well, I learned from mistakes. So I didn't disclose allergies, as I had mentioned before. And I came into my kitchen and my roommate was eating a sesame seed bagel with peanut butter. I'm allergic to sesame and peanut butter. And she left the peanut butter knife just like on the counter and the sesame seeds were spewed all over the place. And I realized, I need to be much more open about communication. So I learned from that. And then the next time I moved into a new dorm, I just told everyone outright, look, you guys have to learn how to wipe the counters. Like, I'll probably wipe the counters again because I don't know how your hygiene level is. And we have this like gross cloth and we're all, university students. So I had my measures in place, but I just asked, if you don't mind, let's be respectful and clean the kitchen. I have my own set of pots and pans. I ask you not to use those. You guys can cook whatever you want. I'm okay with that, so long as you don't use the things that I have set aside for myself. We also created a safe shelf in the fridge, and that was my shelf, and it was the top shelf, so that nothing could fall onto my food, and I felt like it was safe and protected. So I always just had like Kortney zones, is what we called it. So it was like safe areas where my food would be, and then safe utensils. And then we always wiped down every counter. I personally wiped down everything else because as much as I loved my roommates, I didn't think they were the best cleaners on the planet, but at least they were doing something. But I just felt like it was better for me to go over it everything. And that's probably just because my mom's a clean freak and I picked that up from her. It's just about having a set of rules that everyone can adhere by. So it's not asking your roommates to do a lot, but the bare minimum that they can do makes you feel safe. And it's also a discussion with them is, I don't mind you guys having my food allergens, but you have to kind of do this. And then if they go, that's too much for me, I'd rather not have food allergens in the house, then that's their choice, but I'm not asking them to. It's a discussion. And I think that's the best thing is if you have that conversation, they'll respect you and they'll respect what you need instead of you just telling them what you want them to do. That was what I've learned in the past.
So I really like the idea of giving people choices in the living space so that everyone can feel safe, feel like they can play by the rules depending on what they choose to do.
One other thing we did was I have an allergy card that I take into restaurants. We had that on the fridge as kind of like a subtle reminder that this is an allergy-friendly kitchen. And also sometimes they just wanted to see what I was allergic to. But it's kind of like putting a slight reminder there so that they remember why they have to do what they're doing.
Kortney, I love that. I find that we all get busy and we're all caught in our own little worlds, and especially college students. And so those little things you can do, I think, go a really long way. One of the other things I learned through the years was making sure people weren't putting their food, meaning like a sandwich, directly on the counter or directly on the table. I remember a number of years ago, a little girl whose family sent her with a safe meal to a local museum. She ate her meal and had a reaction. Well, the family's like, this was completely safe. And so I started asking details about how do you eat your lunch? And she said, oh, I just put my sandwich on the table. Well, this was at a place where there was a Pizza Hut. And so there was lots of cheese pizza. And my guess is there was a bunch of milk protein on the table. And I realize college students are older, but I think it's a good reminder of another way to keep yourself safe. Another thing that I saw with college students is sometimes families have modified meals to avoid their allergens for years, and they may not know that a given food item often would contain their allergen. So, for example, one of my patients a number of years ago, her family always made pesto without nuts, and she was allergic to multiple tree nuts. And so she went to a cafe in college and ordered pesto, never asked about what was in it, then had anaphylaxis at this cafe. And it reminded me to always caution families that if you're modifying recipes, make sure your child knows that. And also that we should never make any assumptions, and that just because you wouldn't expect X, Y, or Z ingredient being in a food, you still need to ask the question all the time. And so I think this is a factor. Say your roommates are cooking for you. If you're in a situation where you feel comfortable with something like that, we need to also educate them on how to avoid cross-contamination and how to deal with shared spaces, so you feel confident that it's really a safe thing for you to eat.
Yeah. And I think that leads us really nicely into number one. Kortney, you had mentioned what I think was your chef card. And then also reading labels and then obviously asking every time you go to a restaurant. But I think we can delve into those topics a little bit. So Kortney, can you talk a little bit about what a chef card is? Because I think now it's being used pretty regularly by a lot of the allergy community. So we can just kind of delve into it. And if people haven't been using them before, I think this is the perfect time to start using them.
I have one. I was like, I definitely have one on my desk. So you can get these made by different organizations. They have really great templates. I personally like to print out one that's the size of a postcard because a lot of restaurants are quite dark and I want really big font so that they can see it. So I always like to make it a little bit bigger. But basically what it does is it gives me something I can handwrite to the waiter, and that takes a lot of pressure off the waiter's back. And it has all of my allergens on it, and I also explain what cross-contamination is. That's something that's really important, is just to say, when preparing my meal, please use clean utensils, please make sure that surfaces are wiped down, and that starts the conversation with the kitchen, I find. Because a lot of them now know what cross-contamination is or cross-contact, and they're very good with that, but sometimes you need to reiterate that because, I don't know, like the spaghetti might be cooked in the same water for everyone in the restaurant and you don't know what's being dipped in and dipped out utensil wise, so you want fresh water. So that kind of starts the conversation. I also have it in English and Spanish. So one side's English, one side's Spanish, and I find that really helpful in the US, especially because of who might be in the kitchen. Depending on the country I travel to, I'll have it in English and then that respective language. So that's also a little tip I got from a teenager, actually. She was like, I have mine in both languages. And I was like, oh, shoot, that's a great idea. So I've stolen that from her. And the last thing I have on my chef card, because I customize them, is my name. I find that it's really nice to just put a name to the person who is asking for accommodations in a restaurant, just to say that this is a real person and I really appreciate you. And I have like a smiley face emoji on it too.
Kortney, I love how clear you are with everyone. And I think in my experience, the staff really appreciate that. One of the things that I've seen as well is you may ask about, say, nut, for example. The wait staff may say, no, there are no nuts in this dessert, but they don't always go and ask the chef. And I think it's important to remind people that if you're feeling unsettled, you should speak up about that and see if they will go speak to the chef. And if they're not going to, it may be time to leave and not to eat there. I can't tell you how many times families have asked about an ingredient. They're told they don't have it. They get that food when they were feeling unsettled, and then they or their child has a reaction. And so trusting those instincts is really important because you've been doing this for a long time and you know a lot.
I totally agree. I feel like you can kind of get the energy of someone, whether they care or don't care. The great thing about having a chef card, I have to say, is I actually say, can you please give this to the kitchen? And then come back and let me know what they think, if they have any questions, if what I want to eat is possible. If not, what can they do for me? So I always say, please take this. As much as you might not want to, please take this and show this to the kitchen. And then I will ask them multiple times if the kitchen has seen it. And if I feel like the kitchen hasn't seen it, that's kind of a red flag for me. And I think one other thing I'd love to say, and this maybe gets into the reading of labels, is understanding kind of ingredients. So like you said about the pesto, for instance, tuna or olives, these are things that live in different substances, right? So olives live in either olive oil or sunflower oil or water. And to understand that, and I think that comes with practice of reading labels, and that translates to restaurants. So I avoid dishes with olives because I don't know what the olives are swimming in before they go into the dish, unless I feel like the kitchen staff is extremely accommodating and then they're going to go back there and read the labels and tell me what the olives are swimming in. So that's like a really good transition, I think, to talk about maybe labels. When we know more about the food that we're eating by reading labels, we can also translate that into how we manage our allergies in restaurants and also with other people who are cooking for us. So how do you see that transition from your parents' house, say, to out in the real world and having to navigate a grocery store for the first time?
I hope that the individual has been working on this for many years. I think personally that graduated age appropriate level of responsibility really improves self-efficacy and reduces anxiety. However, if you haven't had that experience, don't fear. You could start by reading some labels and shopping with your family member right before you go to school, or maybe even do that first trip with a family member and review the labels. The nice thing, at least, is the 9 major allergens are very clearly labeled, and so that can help. But I think the most important thing is to read labels all the time and recognize that different package sizes may have slightly different ingredients, so not to make any assumptions there as well. And when you go the first time, make sure you're allowing yourself to have the time to read labels. Don't think you're going to run in and out in 5 or 10 minutes. You're just setting yourself up for failure. Take the time. And if that means going on your own, without your roommate who might want to be in and out of the store, make sure you give yourself all the opportunities to succeed. And don't hesitate to ask for help from your family that's been shopping for you up until this point.
Yeah, and Kortney and I keep mentioning this, but we do want to do a dedicated label reading episode because there are so many nuances to this topic. For the newcomers, it's really important to understand that your food allergen can be called many, many different things on that food label. And so to understand what the different names are for your food is really important too. Like, for example, cow's milk can also be called casein. And so we just want to make sure that you're aware of the different names that might appear on a label that might not just say milk, and it might say something else. So that's just one other thing to understand. And again, the person that's been shopping will definitely understand that. And as Theresa said, we hope everyone's been doing this for a while so that you already know that.
For a college student that might be doing a semester abroad, it's really important to understand the labeling laws in the country you're going to. And as Kortney said, have your chef card translated to that language. Because the labeling laws differ by country, you can't make an assumption that something that's clearly labeled in the US is going to be clearly labeled somewhere else.
That's a big learning curve for a lot of people. Some countries make labeling very, very nice. So hopefully you'll get a sweet surprise in some countries. Another aspect of leaving your parents' house is you're kind of free in a sense, and you might be experiencing a totally new type of social life. So we talked about making new friends and teaching them how to use your epinephrine device. We talked about roommates. We slightly talked about dining out, but we haven't really talked about going out in groups necessarily or going to parties. So that's a big part of university culture. That's also a big part of just like living on your own. How can we set up this age group so that they feel safe, that they don't have to miss out on anything social?
So, like many things in food allergy, planning in advance can be very helpful. Some teenagers, college students with food allergy will look up what alcoholic beverages may be free of their allergen. I think for most people, if you're going out to a party, it's good to have a wingman or wingwoman to keep you safe as you're entering this environment. But it's even more important if you have a food allergy. So someone else who maybe isn't drinking and is observing what you're doing, trying to make sure that you're not going to get into trouble. Say you're imbibing and you found something that in itself is okay for you. We know that alcohol can diminish inhibitions. And so you want someone to be thoughtful and to watch out for what you're doing to also keep you safe. And also, you don't want to necessarily share glasses with other individuals, or if people are smoking, you don't want to share either cigarettes or joints or whatever people may be doing. Another thing to think about, if you have any romantic partners, you really would like to ask them to refrain from consuming your food allergen or allergens for several hours before intimate contact to avoid any issues there as well.
And I think that the big one with that is just if you're out and you meet someone spontaneously and you want to enjoy that moment, I think that's where things do get a little bit tricky and you do have to have a conversation. But I always tell people that if it's someone that you're about to get intimate with, you would hope that they would care enough to want to know that you have a food allergy, number one, and number two, they would be totally open to telling you what they ate or if anything they ate may have contained your allergen. And so those are things that are definitely easier said than done, but definitely very, very important, because there have been situations where somebody did not tell that person that they had a food allergy, and then they did start having a reaction and the other person had no idea what was going on, right? And that person might also be under the influence of alcohol or other drugs that would be impairing their ability to think quickly also. So again, putting people in a situation that's scary is not going to be good for anybody, and it's not going to lead to a better relationship with you and that other person. It's actually could be very detrimental to your relationship. And obviously, it could be a huge safety hazard. So those are the things to remember, which again, I know is hard to remember at this age. And it's just all so new. But thinking about these things ahead of time is super important, and trying to figure out a way where you would feel comfortable having that conversation. And if you don't feel comfortable, then maybe it's not the right time to get into those situations.
And I like to remind my patients this age that if you have questions, ask your allergist. You might be going to appointments alone at this time, but if you're not, you can say to your parent, can I talk to the allergist alone? Or I always try to remember to get a little alone time. But the other thing I tell people is, why don't you practice or role play with someone that you trust, whether that's your allergist, whether that's a friend, for these situations. So you can think in advance about, what will I say when this comes up? In my experience, most of my food allergic patients have scenarios that they're thinking about, that they're worried about. What's going to happen? Could this happen? And I think the more you think through the way you would handle them in advance, I'm not going to say it's easy, but it will be easier to have those conversations.
Yeah, sometimes having these scripts are really helpful. So, for instance, dining out or refusing food, having a couple of sentences that you can rely on so you don't feel like you're put on the spot is a really good thing to have in your food allergy toolkit. So, I love that. I love that practicing having your confident words is really good, especially when you do feel like there's a lot of pressure and you might not be true to yourself. But if you have those sets of words, that might help you stick to your gut feeling of what's right and what isn't right.
And ultimately, I think another reminder is that most people know somebody with a food allergy at this point. I think that it's rare that you'll meet somebody who doesn't have a friend or a family member or colleague that has had a food allergy. So I think most people are aware of what that means. So you don't have to be scared that you are different and that nobody will understand you or that you're the only one with this problem. Maybe there's other people right around you. Maybe the person that you're trying to kiss has a food allergy too, and they were worried about telling you. So it really is just understanding that communication is the key to life in general, but definitely when you have a food allergy, communication is so important.
And given this age group is often remiss at carrying their epinephrine, I am going to make a plug again about making sure you're carrying your epinephrine with you. No one plans on having an allergic reaction. You can't say, well, I'm not going to eat, I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to do that. It's kind of like no one plans on getting into an accident when they drive out each day. And so we have insurance for a reason. We have epinephrine for a reason, and it works only if you have it and you use it. So find a creative way to carry your medicine with you, whether that's a little purse, whether you have large pockets. Some guys like to bring those little string backpacks. Whatever works for you, as long as you have it with you, is the most important thing.
Yeah. And I think ultimately all of this is a lot. We talk a lot about the emotional challenges of just being a young adult, but then being a young adult with food allergies or with any chronic illness can really feel overwhelming. And so we want to make sure we address that too. So, Theresa, do you have any pointers on things that people can watch out for to know that maybe they should seek help if they're feeling overly emotional regarding this transition?
Absolutely. It's such an important point that I think this transition in general is so hard, but adding on anything else makes it that much harder. And so I always recommend that people look at how they're feeling on a daily basis. Are you becoming more and more anxious? Are you thinking about situations even when you're not in them? Is your food allergy keeping you from going out or from joining friends? I realized that through the years that several of my patients would go out, but they would never eat when they went out. And some of that might have been appropriate, but some of it was just never eating for fear of having an issue, as opposed to bringing something or maybe making arrangements. And so if you find that your food allergy is keeping you from going out, from participating in things, or if you're having a lot of worry and repetitive thoughts, it's definitely important to seek help. And at school, that may be starting with student health and finding a counselor. Ongoing counseling can be tremendously helpful for a variety of reasons. But I think the most important point is that you reach out to someone. You are not alone in this. People want to help. People want to see you thrive, and people want to help give you ideas and support. Please reach out if you're having a hard time in any way.
Yeah, I think that sometimes we don't want to feel like a burden on people, but at the end of the day, people really truly want to help and they want to see you live your best life, really, and they're going to support you. And that was something that as a college student, I was very surprised by. As I said, for the 100th time, I was one of those like keep it to myself people until it came out in a really big way. And I was the girl who left the dorm room in the ambulance. And that was very embarrassing for me. But then I was like, shoot, I should have just told everyone at the beginning and then this wouldn't have been less embarrassing. So definitely give people the benefit of the doubt because they do want to help you. And I just have one more question because we talked about you seeing the allergist on your own for the first time, and it might be really challenging. Do you have any tips for people who have, say, moved away and now they have to navigate the medical system on their own from 18 to 21? I feel like that's a massive thing to take on your own.
It definitely is. And so if you are able to connect with your same allergist first, I think that makes it a little less intimidating, someone that you've had a relationship with. But I also tell people to think about the questions and the concerns they have in advance and writing them down so they can make sure they get those things addressed when you're there. If you don't have the possibility of seeing your own allergist, student health physicians are used to working with this population. They are very good at drawing things out of people, and they're a pretty supportive clinical environment. But it's important to also make sure you have your insurance cards and if you have a prescription card. So make sure you have those things on you. You can also talk to your parents about copays or coinsurance and how you will handle those things. You may have insurance through your school or through your family, depending what that is. Find out where you can go can be helpful. Finding out where the nearest hospital is may also be helpful. Also, setting reminders when you need to get a new prescription for epinephrine or replace your device, or many of our patients with food allergies have other atopic conditions. So how are you going to make sure that you're getting your inhalers monthly or any other meds that you need? And so setting reminders, asking for help where you need it. Your parents will like you to reach out when you need something. They'll feel better. And if you're not comfortable there, I think the student health physician or other friends that are navigating even these medical situations without a food allergy can often provide some suggestions as well. One of the other challenges I find people have is just filling out the medical forms because they've never done it before. You can ask the physician or whoever's caring for you there for help. If you're comfortable asking your parents, that can help too.
Yeah, and we're all used to carrying around our phones. And so another tip is that you don't have to have your physical insurance card. Like if you misplace, if you lose it, just take a picture of it right when you get it from your family member. Take a picture of the front and back of the card and just put it in a special album in your phone so that you know where that is. You can also take a picture of your anaphylaxis action plan that your doctor may give you. And all of those things can just be kept in a little health folder on your phone. And you can also tell your really good friends about where that is and what that looks like. That's another easy way of keeping everything in a safe place. And as Theresa mentioned, your regular allergist might be able to see you over telemedicine. So that's always a possibility. Looking out for options like that is super helpful and important so that you don't feel lost when you go to school.
I think that taking on your own medical organization is like the biggest step to adulthood because you realize how much your parents were doing for you for so long. So thank you for sharing those tips. I think those were really, really important. You're going to have to learn what all those words mean because copay, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, it's going to be a lot, but you got it. And you're going to be set up for life, right? Once you figure that out. I would love to know from both our doctors what your tip would be to someone who is about to embark on this beautiful new chapter.
So the first thing I would tell them is that while there's a lot of changes, they have navigated this for presumably about 18 years, and they know more than they think they do. Whenever we have transitions, something new always comes up that you didn't think about in that exact way. I want them to remember that there's lots of people that care about them, including at home and at school, that will help them navigate this and that they can do this. And that not being 100% confident doesn't mean that they can't do it, that the confidence comes with doing this over time. And if they're struggling, just to reach out because there's plenty of supports at school and at home, and their friends are going to want to support them too. And they might learn by reaching out to a friend that a friend is struggling with a similar issue, whether it's food allergy or something else. Last but not least, always carry your epinephrine and use it if you need it.
Thanks again, Theresa. Those are really good tips. For me, I would say just communication is key. That will serve you well in all aspects of your life moving forward. So communicating what you need, communicating your food allergy, communicating how you're feeling about your food allergy. It just comes down to communication. So it's going to be fine. And it is overwhelming, and it's overwhelming for everybody. Don't feel like you're alone in that either. And yes, you do have a big community of people that are there for you and want to help you. So just remember that everyone wants to keep you safe no matter what.
Thank you. I needed to hear that like 18 years ago. So thank you so much for joining us on our Ages and Stages 18 to 21. We have the handout in our show notes in case anyone wants to read along or see what they can talk about with their child or what you can talk about with your parents if you're listening, some of those sticky points. So in case you want just a physical copy, we've got that in our show notes. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Remember that all information you hear today is for informational purposes only and are not intended to serve as a substitute for the consultation, diagnosis, and/or medical treatment of a qualified physician or healthcare provider. And also, don't forget to subscribe to our podcast. And if you have a second, help spread the word by rating our podcast and sharing with your friends and family who might also be interested in learning more about allergies, asthma, and immunology. You can always stay up to date by checking out our Instagram, The Itch Podcast, where you can leave questions you are itching to know, or check out our website, which is www.itchpodcast.com, which contains more information about the subjects we covered in today's episode and every episode. Until next time, have a fabulous week.